But as you say, things like the OBX and the Juno and the DX7 and stuff now have become very much a part of the. You still play them like an instrument, you know.
Yeah, and people like
Don't program them.
really massive pop stars are using those sounds in their heads and have been for 10
And Weather Report, one of my favourite bands ever. You know, Joe Zawinul used tons of synths,
Yeah.
really good synth sounds as well.
You hear like Miley Cyrus and The Weeknd and people like that having huge hits with all those sounds on in today's pop culture, and I do think they're here to stay. I think but in the 90s they were very passé. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what the 80s did. And
yeah,
you do create a little backlash to it.
I think the 90s in the UK went back to the 60s for inspiration, and the Britpop bands I grew up listening to, in particular, sort of Blur, Oasis.
Well, also people have
Supergrass.
gone back to recording on tape and cutting on things onto vinyl now as well. So that's another step. You step back, if you like, back to the old, the old ways, and the old days.
I think it's just literally we have every choice available to us now.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very, very privileged and very honored to have David Joseph and the one and only Robbie McIntosh of Held by Trees. And they've got a new album out, and it's 2 EPs, right?
Correct, yes. Hi, Kyle. Good to be with you, mate.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And y'all are all the way in the UK.
We're on the south coast of England, yeah.
What is it, about 8 or 9 o'clock over there now?
Yeah, it's just gone 9 o'clock. Yeah, this time of year it's still pretty light outside, so it's nice.
Before we get into talking about the new music, we'll start with you, David. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm probably one of the youngest in the band. I started out in rock bands and sort of did what most rock bands do, kind of play little gigs, lots of little gigs, as many as you can, and then sort of thin them out as you go on and be a bit more selective. And yeah, we got to a point where we were starting to be flown around and play different places, which was really exciting, but all good things come to an end. I think being in a rock band and being married with 3 kids is kind of it's quite a challenge if you can't make it all pay the bills. So the rock band naturally finished, and I started to make more instrumental music. I did some singer-songwritery things for a while, but instrumental music became more and more interesting to me. And in 2020, I started to write what's become Held by Trees. And to cut a story short, I mean, we can get into it a bit more if you want to, but I find myself in this sort of collective of musicians, many of whom I've admired from afar for a long time. And we've made an album that came out last year called Solace, came out in 2022. And we have, like you just said, recorded already. We've recorded 2 EPs, which will come out in a sort of a double release in August of 2023. And I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Robbie McIntosh, and it's a great privilege to be making music with so many musicians that I've admired for a long time. So it's kind of all taken me a little bit by surprise, really. But I suppose because we have a bit of a similar sound to some of the later talk records that are very loved by a lot of people, and we've got several people that worked on those records playing on our records. There's a kind of living connection. But there's Pink Floyd in there, and there's yeah, there's a few other influences that are important to me, not just talk, and it's standing on its own 2 feet somewhat now. That's kind of an overview of the whole project, including me. I play guitar in the live band and produce the record, and that's me. Should we hear from Rob?
Well, sure. I guess we can talk to him as well.
Yeah, I'm Robbie McIntosh. I've been playing the guitar for a long time now, and worked with. I was in the Pretenders for 5 years in the 1980s. I took over from James Hammond Scott when he sadly passed away, and then I was with Paul McCartney's band for 6 years. I've done a lot of session work, Tears for Fears, Roger Daltrey, Paul Young. More recently, I played with Norah Jones for a while. I played with John Mayer for on and off for about 4 years. So I played with Tom Jones and Sinead O'Connor and various other people. So as more as a session player, and the reason I'm here is because from having worked with Talk Talk, David contacted me to make the connection, which he's just described with the Talk Talks. I played on 3 Talk Talk albums and Mark Hollis's solo record. So I met David through that. He contacted me to play on the record, and then I said yes to doing some live shows as well. So, and that's why I'm here, because we're just having a play and see if we can write some, come up with a bit of new material. David writes most of the stuff, but just bringing me in to see if we can work on any ideas I might have, and so that's why I'm here.
Yeah,
That's me.
with writing, it's actually Rob. Excuse me, Rob gives me a bit too much credit, really, because the best thing about the music is the improvisation.
Yeah,
These guys bring over fairly basic chord progressions and drum patterns that I came up with, but it's kind of a launch pad for Rob.
True. Yeah, it's true. I mean, Talk Talk in a way was a bit like that at times. Although Mark Hollis was pretty fussy, and of course wrote all the lyrics and sung, and he was the brains behind the whole thing, really. But he would let musicians sort of give a free hand. I mean, back in the Talk days, everything was recorded onto tape, and so you'd maybe do, for instance, on the Colour of Spring album and Spirit of Eden album, you'd just let you play for maybe 3 or 4 takes, and then they do what they call comping, where you pick, I like that bit and I like that bit, and you bounce from that track on the tape machine to an empty track, the bits that you like, by muting and opening up the tracks. These days, of course, it's so much easier with Pro Tools or Logic to do that. But in those days, so Mark would just sort of give you a free hand and then pick the best bits, really, the bits that fitted. So I can't remember how I got there to that. Oh, you talked about improvisation. Yeah. There's a similar element here. I mean, when David sent the tracks to me at home, I did exactly that. I sent him sort of 3, 4 takes of something, and then he would sift through it and pick the best bits that fitted with the mood and what other people were playing, of course, as well. So that's quite important.
and that spirit of jazz where you just improvise and jam and have a good time.
I mean, the only what was nice about the more recent recordings we did is that we actually all played together. And that interplay is actually easier to do when you're sitting. There's a certain magic you definitely get when you're all playing together.
Yeah, it's amazing how polar opposite our debut Solace, which was made during lockdown, and people across the world, in their own home setups, usually sending me takes for me to sort of go through, and not being in the same room, to then our follow-up EPs being 6 guys in a room. the complete opposite way of making, all playing together. So
Yeah.
it's two very different approaches.
To me, when I listened to it, it was like Pink Floyd meets Spiral Gyra or something, it had that real nice flow, relaxing at times, and I don't know, it's like listening to Dark Side of the Moon for the first time for me.
Wow. Good. Wow.
That's nice, yeah.
That's a huge,
I
huge
think that's
compliment.
the idea behind the record as well, isn't it? I mean, it's certainly the feeling you get from being in and around nature, which is hence why the album's called Held by Trees, presumably, because you did some field recording and stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, the name comes from, actually, I was having some counselling, some therapy, I guess you might call it in the States, and that my Rob and I are both tall guys, so I'm 6'5", and I was saying to my therapist,
you're really tall.
Yeah. But I was saying to my counsellor, I'm often the guy I'm the guy that hugs. I'm the guy that is holding the other person. I'm never the guy being held, because I'm always bigger than anyone else. And she said, why don't you climb some trees and feel held by the trees? So I started to do that. I started to climb trees and feel them holding my weight. Kind of like a sort of spiritual practice in a way. And so that was all around the same time as I started to write the music. So it felt like a nice name, because it was that first lockdown and it was springtime and everything felt new again somehow, because there weren't planes in the sky and there weren't loads of traffic, and the spring was glorious here in Dorset in England. Everything smelt amazing, and I had all these field recordings that I was working into the music. So there is very much a natural element connection with trees. So there's a few reasons why the name of the project works that way. There's a track on there called The Tree of Life, which is one of my favorite films. It's a Terrence Malick film. But there's also a biblical sort of connection there too.
Was the album kind of like therapy for you?
Yeah, huge, massively. So my wife works in healthcare, so she was a primary worker. That's what we called it here in the UK, when she worked through the pandemic, whereas I didn't. My focus was on trying to get my kids to do their schoolwork, and I found that immensely stressful. So stressful. And my lovely wife said, why don't you bring your studio back home and set up your music stuff, so you can just escape into your music after you've done the schoolwork with the kids. Just set up at home, and I did. And that's when the first pieces of music started to come through, and I called the album Solace.
Because it rhymes with Hollis.
No.
No, I'm joking.
Well, because it was solace to make. It was real solace to make. So people like Rob would send me, like you said, three or four takes for each song that he played on, and I'd be just buried in my headphones, having the time of my life, just combing through all these amazing motifs, different parts that people had sent in, and what a privilege that was, just to hear all these different ideas. And 90% of that didn't make the record, because otherwise it'd be just a widdly mess of endless noodling, kind of dream theatre or something like that. But so I had to, in order to get that spacious feeling that Talk and Hollis was so good at, I had to really be very strict and strip it right back to the absolute bare minimum, really, of what you can put together. so you have that tension always in the music. That was really important. But yeah, that was huge. To answer your question, hugely therapeutic, and it took a year to edit.
Has that been like your biggest hurdle? Is like the mental problems you've had?
In my life, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I've gone through depression and had a breakdown and stuff in my life, but music's always been a source of solace and comfort and a divine language. So
the lockdown was very strange for a lot of people, wasn't it? Because that's the make or break, you know.
Yeah. Well, if you're already prone to depression and then you get isolated from the world for what,
Absolutely, that's what I'm
2
saying.
years?
That a lot of people didn't handle it very well, didn't they?
it was and people were dying. Like people were dying. People I knew died, and
I knew somebody, yeah, probably knew very well. But,
yeah, and although there was, you know, I can maybe make the mistake of painting a very bucolic, beautiful picture about lockdown because it was such a gorgeous spring, but at the same time, the world was going through something extraordinary that we haven't, well, certainly I hadn't ever known anything like that before. Lockdowns and shutdowns and isolating and people being sick and dying and fear, lots of fear.
Yeah.
No wonder people have got all sorts of thoughts and theories on what was going on, but and we won't get into that, but it's an amazing thing this side of it now to look back at what we all lived through.
I couldn't go anywhere because I was having chemotherapy during it.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah, the August of 2020, I got diagnosed with the type of blood cancer called lymphoma,
Uh-huh.
non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So I had to have chemotherapy. So I couldn't go anywhere because it was when you got to think chemotherapy, you've got to be really careful you don't pick up an infection anywhere.
Yeah.
Especially COVID. So the only place I went was the hospital every week. You know, 3 weeks for the chemotherapy. I had to go into hospital 3 times. It was all pretty weird. You know, the nurses all wearing masks and aprons and stuff. It was all quite scary, but I got through it. Touch wood. I think I'm all right now.
Yeah. And when you're going through something like that, your immune system's already compromised.
Absolutely, yeah. By the time you get to the end of it, by the time you get to the end of the chemotherapy, you have 6 courses, course every 3 weeks. By the time you get to the end of it, you know, you haven't got any hair, then you walk. We did go out for some walks. We used to take the dogs out, but keep away from people and stuff. You get really tired, you know. You walk about 50 yards and you've got to stop and have a breather because all your your red blood cells are being killed just along with everything else, you know. But I got through it. It was a funny old time, I have to say.
Yeah, double scary for you.
Yeah, I was really careful. My wife looked after me pretty well though, so got through it. Bit of a shock when you find out you got it, but you know, you just get on with it. And as soon as I found out, I didn't break down or anything. I just said, right, let's go. I think I said, we'll have to have chemotherapy. And she said, yes. I said, will my hair fall out? She went, yes. So I went, right, let's do it. That's the weirdest thing. That was the only thing I thought about is going bald. No, I haven't got that much yet.
If that was the least of your worries. Jeez.
The only thing that struck me. That was all right. It could have been a lot worse. We know people that we've lost people to cancer, you know, so it could have been a lot worse, as I say.
And it what really sucks is that it seems like the world is already geared for kind of keeping people apart. There's people always on their cell phones and, on the computer. You go to the store, they've got the automatic checkouts, self-service checkouts, and then all of a sudden you're told, well, you have to be 6 feet apart from people, or you have to be behind a mask or stay at home, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Buy everything online or in retail is completely different now. Well, that was already started before the lockdown, but I think even more people buy things from Amazon or Amazon. And you don't go out shopping much anymore. Yeah.
And I'm a people person. I like talking to folks.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, me too.
Is how difficult is it to keep from trying to sound like the old bands?
Well, I think it's unavoidable to an extent that you're going to be sounding reminiscent. Even the most avant-garde bands out there, it kind of was all done by 1970, really. So if you're gonna use guitars and piano, drums, you're gonna sound reminiscent of someone else, because it's kind of. But I think it's the particular blend that you can put together, because having said what I've just said, I think there's a particular chemistry and magic with every group of musicians that play together, because there's a human being playing an instrument, channeling their soul through their instrument, and then mixing it with other people's. And if you've got a commonality, and I think what we're lucky with really is that, particularly with the core of Held by Trees as it now sort of is, since we became a live band and started to gig, because the Solace has got 30 musicians on it. It's got a wide cast, but coming to a lineup that could deliver something of the album live, I had to choose who I was going to ask and try and sort of build something. And thankfully, it came together really quite quickly and easily. I mean, we did rehearse for 9 months before we played a gig, but we clicked as people. And that's the thing with music. If you can get that blend of people right, that respect each other and are sympathetic to each other's music, no one's ego is dominating, no one's trying to vie for the spotlight, but there's a sympathy and an empathy with each other's playing.
Right.
You are gonna have something like a Fingerprint that's completely unique. So sonically, yeah, we've got Pink Floyd in there, because there's a lot more lead guitar than the kind of talk stuff, and there's the sound effects and field recordings, which is quite. I mean, Pink Floyd use sound effects, field recordings quite a lot. Talk not so much. I heard someone say, if a band only has one influence, then they're going to be a pastiche. But if a band has several influences, then you've got that, And I think within the English kind of rock tradition, we're kind of leaning into that slightly melancholy British sound, a little bit understated. It's not particularly hi-fi and shiny. It's quite mellow. So that there's the talk thing, the Pink Floyd thing, and then there's this. Yeah, Dire Straits are an influence on me as well, and a band called Sky, who are that's an instrumental band. But my favourite musician in the world that I've long admired is Graham Coxon. I have a band called Blur, and they're like a Britpop thing, He's multi-instrumentalist and a bit of a genius.
Interesting what you said about, you know, how do you stop sounding like other bands? You know, and the rock and roll really is, you know, because we are, you know, even though we're, you know, you wouldn't call Talk Talk a rock and roll band, but I'm talking about rock and roll as general genre, if you like, rock. I mean, the instruments really are bass, drums, guitars, organs, pianos, and things, aren't they? Really. And then, you know, everything on Solace, apart from the field records, are real instruments. You know, you got wind, you got blown, your saxophones and flutes, clarinet. You know, things that are real instruments, not synthesizers pretending to be other instruments. I mean, I did have, when I formed my own band about 25 years ago, we played, you know, what I didn't have a keyboard player in the band because I didn't really want synthesizers. So I had a pedal steel guitar player instead of a keyboard player. But that's beside the point, really. But what I'm saying is, you know, synthesizers can actually sort of create this strange sort of plastic world. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. I mean, you listen to early 80s in particular, sort of. If you listen to early 80s, you know, Van Morrison, for example, or even like maybe not Phil Collins, but certainly Van Morrison, there's this kind of rush to embrace the synthesized versions of great sounds.
Yeah.
And I would argue that 80s synthesizers are here to stay in the way that Hammond organs are here to stay. Your Roland Juno 6, you know, your DX7s.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Those sounds are so now sort of ubiquitous in contemporary pop music. I think they're just part of the lexicon of pop and rock. They're here to stay now.
The Lindrum had a big effect on 80s music, really. That really did affect the sound of 80s music. It's really dated 80s music.
And Simmons drums.
I mean, the Lindrum especially, you can hear it on so many records.
I mean, Lindrum is Prince, isn't it? Nearly everything Prince did from...
Yeah, I mean, the first Blue Nile album is Lindrum.
Oh, love it.
That's a great album. So I'm not dissing the Lindrum completely, but it did, you know, it was on a lot of records in the 80s.
Yeah.
Got it on so many things.
Loads of Phil Collins and...
and of course that made it sort of... the other thing that it did was grid the time, although they didn't use grids like you do now on Pro Tools and Logic and stuff, but it did make things absolutely perfectly in time. You know, before that people did start playing to click tracks, but Lindrum did away with that completely and was just perfectly in time all the way through the song, nothing speeding up. You listen to the Who live at Leeds and the time's all over the place, but it's fantastic. You know, the excitement from a rock band when they speed up towards the end of something as it gets more exciting. It's something special that a lot's been lost really to a certain extent.
Yes, yeah.
But, so I was just thinking about Lindrums and synthesizers, you know, stamping their signature on a lot of music, certainly in the 1980s. But as you say, things like the OBX and the Juno and the DX7 and stuff now have become very much a part of the. You still play them like an instrument, you know.
Yeah, and people like really massive pop stars are using those sounds in their heads and have been for 10
Weather Report, one of my favourite bands ever. You know, Joe Zawin will use tons of synths. Yeah. Really good synth sounds as well.
You hear like Miley Cyrus and The Weeknd and people like that having huge hits with all those sounds on. in today's pop culture, and I do think they're here to stay. I think they're, but in the 90s they were very passé. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what the 80s did. And
Yeah.
you did create a little backlash to it.
I think the 90s in the UK went back to the 60s for inspiration, and the Britpop bands I grew up listening to, in particular, sort of Blur, Oasis,
But also people have
Supergrass.
gone back to recording on tape and cutting on things onto vinyl now as well. So that's another step. You step back, if you like, back to the old,
Yeah,
the old ways in the old days.
I think it's just literally we have every choice available to us now.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to work on real desks and work and mix the old school way with Phil Brown, and I like to use really nice preamps and EQs and stuff out of the box, as it were, not that all the plugins. I like a bit of plugins when I'm editing, but when it comes to sort of compressors and outboard, I do think personally my taste would be to get that warm and approachable sound, I like to call it. It's nice to use that gear, and it just brings a certain magic through the.
Well, I still record with an amplifier, with a microphone in front of a speaker.
Yeah.
I can't use any of the sort of plug-in guitar stuff. For me, it just doesn't. There's something not there. There's something missing. It's like the sound's kind of two-dimensional when you record with guitar plugins, of which there are many, many. And a lot of our guitar players will argue that they're just as good, but I don't use a Kemper and I don't use plugins on when I do guitars. I've got an amp at home with a speaker with a microphone in front of it, because I still think it sounds better. It's easy for some reason. It's easier to mix as well because it's got some sort of shape to it. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to put your finger on what it is. I have recorded on virtual guitar amps and things, but I still like to use an amp, a real thing,
When you listen to a record, you can hear like the air, and there's something crispier about each instrument when you're playing it live in the studio compared to what they do on a computer nowadays. Any kid could sit in his bedroom and make an album on a computer.
Yeah. When I worked with George Martin quite a few times, and then when I worked with McCartney said George Martin always said that certain sounds have what he described as value for money, whereas I don't think a lot of process sounds now, certainly guitar sounds that you get out from plugins or virtual amplifiers, they don't have value for money. That's the only way I could describe it, really.
There's a physicality about that which you kind of hinted at.
With the air moving.
Yeah, the air moving.
Yeah.
The air moving, the actual air moving, and an actual electronic current moving through something. Not just a load of zeros and ones emulating it.
Right.
But an actual signal path. Physically, the sound waves are going through, and it's all kind of there's an alchemy to that, I think, and maybe 80% of listeners wouldn't tell the difference, but for the 20% who care, it's the differess between, I think, like let's use an analogy of like an SLR camera using film versus a 12 megapixel digital camera on your phone. I think,
well, moving pictures, there's certainly a difference between VT and film, no doubt. You can see that whenever you watch a film or you watch something like a soap opera, especially recorded onto, you can see that there's a difference just in the quality. It's a similar thing with sound.
I mean, most of us musos watched the Get Back series on the Beatles.
Right.
and the stunning clarity, because it was filmed on good film back in 1969.
Yeah.
And then to bring it to kind of the best of both worlds, where you're using digital processing to kind of make sure it's as optimum quality as possible, you kind of end up with a hybrid. And I guess there's no way, these days, there's no way, well, there probably are ways, but the most mainstream approaches to making music, at some stage you're going to have to involve a digital processor. But if you can get as much character in your tone before that,
yeah,
you're gonna
absolutely.
have a better end result. And that's the big difference between Solace and the new stuff we've got coming, is that we went to a world-class studio and worked with world-class engineers who to make these 2 new EPs using, you know, top spec everything, top spec instruments, like the piano there.
That's Peter Gabriel's studio, right?
That's right, yeah, Peter Gabriel's Real World Studios, which isn't too far from where we live. Rob and I don't live that far from each other. We live 45-minute drive from each other on the south coast, and it's just not. It's about an hour and a half up into Wiltshire from here. But being basically in a round. So we had drums, piano, flute, clarinet, sax with Andy. Then sort of out round to the mixing console, and Rob and me. And James near in the middle. And it's just a massive room. It's more like the size of a church, small.
Yeah, and it's also like a giant control room rather than a studio with a control room sort of stuck on the end. You're actually in the room with the desk and the monitors, right?
It's like Starship Enterprise with this kind of wraparound desk. How many channels do you reckon that is?
What inputs on the
Well,
desk?
just
I don't know, 48, 64,
Yeah.
something like that, probably.
tons,
Yeah.
loads.
Well, I don't even know what the board was actually.
It's an SSL.
Oh, SSL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're 48 inputs, something like that.
But it's built out of an old mill, so the weir still runs. The river sort of still runs. So you've got the control room looks out. The studio, the big room. It up against it is water with swans swimming around.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And then you step outside, and there's this rushing water just going under the mill, the old mill. Then you go.
It was wet, wasn't it? It had been raining, so there was a lot of water.
Yeah, there was a lot of water. And you think, surely this is going to. But the soundproofing is immaculate, so of course it doesn't end up on the recordings. But you know, they've got rooms that we didn't even use. Peter was mixing the Atmos version of his new album while we were there. So me and James, the bass player, got to hang out with Peter.
Oh, that had to be fun.
Oh, it was amazing, because I'm genuinely like, he's a massive deal for me. I absolutely adore his music.
Yeah, he's great.
So and I grew up listening to Genesis. So you know, his music is a big part of my life. And to meet him in his own studio and sort of chat, gave him a copy of our record, and it was just a massive privilege.
Yeah, I met him once, but I never worked with him. But I did meet him backstage at a gig years and years ago.
But he likes the same guys every time, doesn't he?
He uses David Rhodes, Tony Levin,
Manu Katché.
Manu Katché, the drums probably. Then he still uses Manu.
Yeah, he's on the tour.
Is he?
Yeah, he's touring. I'm seeing him in a few weeks.
David still playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah. Because Rob did some of the guitars on Talk stuff, and David Rhodes did a bit as well. And
yeah, we both played on Colour of Spring. Yeah,
Colour of Spring.
Yeah. Yeah, me and David. David did the single "Life's What You Make It." I did more than David actually. I did more acoustic than David, because David more of a kind of electric effectsy guy. He's a great player though.
Well, I think you did those gorgeous flourishes on "Happiness Is Easy," didn't you?
Well, the acoustic guitar. Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
See, that is pure magic. They were quite they sampled Lee playing drums and then cut it all up and sort of programmed.
But they didn't sample it because they used a sampler. They recorded it onto tape.
Right.
No, yeah.
And then cut it up.
And then cut it up, yeah.
So it has this amazingly kind of unique groove, and it's really quite sparse. And then there's these flashes and flourishes of Rob's acoustic guitar playing.
And there's this beautiful chorus of this children's choir, school choir singing on it. It's really quite stunning.
It's just amazing. Yeah. It's so ahead of its time. It feels so fresh even now. But yeah, then they kind of, they went from that album, which kind of is the midpoint, because they made 5 records, 2 quite synth poppy records, and then the Colour of Spring, which kind of pointed towards the more minimal, sort of experimental sound that Spirit of Eden and Laughingstock went and developed more fully.
And then Mark's solo album was another extension of that. Now, ironically, there's a track on that called Colour of Spring.
Yeah, yeah. But he liked to return to sort of familiar motifs within his lyrics, and a song like April 4th on Colour of Spring, which I think is his wife's birthday. But that was there's a lot about spring. There's a lot about new life and things in his lyrics. But Rob and Lawrence and Andy, who are in the core Held by Trees band, they all work with Mark.
Well, we played on Mark's solo record.
Yeah, but Lawrence was good, very good friends with him on a personal level.
Yeah, because he lived in Wimbledon Village with him. Lived up very close to him, didn't he?
Played golf with him and also
golf. Yeah.
I've got to know his son recently.
What keeps you inspired? Because I know things got to get rough from time to time. What keeps you going?
But I've got 4 kids. They don't live at home anymore. Making sure they're okay is important, and my wife, and I'm having a clear out of stuff at the moment. It's actually really exciting to get home tomorrow, because I've cleared a lot of stuff out. I had this room it's sort of like the basement room, and you could hardly get in there. There was so much stuff all over the place, and of course I've got all my guitar cases in there. Because when the guitars are out of the cases, you still got to find somewhere to put the cases, which is, and they're stupid because they're empty, and you kind of think, I've got all my guitars in my front room where I do all my recording, but all the empty cases are. So I made this shelf unit to put them all on, so they're out of the way now. And I've just sold an amp, 2 amps and a speaker cabinet. I'm in the process of selling all my gold discs as well.
Are you?
Yeah. Oh. So they would sit up in the loft, because I think it's probably just because I'm too modest, I suppose. I would never put them up in the house for people to see when they came round. And I just think it'd just be ridiculous.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I know a few record label people, and I do Zoom with them. They've got the gold discs all over the walls, but the actual artists in question just put them in the loft. It's hilarious.
I've got a 10 that I'm selling.
10 of them.
4 McCartney ones, 3 Pretenders ones, a Norah Jones one, and a Roger Daltrey one, because I did an album with Roger Daltrey back in '85, and that sold quite well. And I think that's it, actually.
So the McCartney ones would go, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
They'll probably all go.
I'll take the Daltrey one.
The one of the Pretenders ones is platinum.
There you go. You just sold one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll take it. I got about $5. Will that do it?
Right.
So clearing your house out keeps you going, Rob?
Well, at the moment, yeah, but I mean, I still, listening to my favourite music is obviously a turn on. I still listen to John Martin, I still listen to Little Feat, and I still listen to God, the Beatles now and again. You know, I don't listen to much. I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, I don't really keep up with new music. My kids are always telling me, "Oh, have you heard that? Have you heard that?" And usually the answer is no, and so I have to listen to something, they turn me on to. But they all play actually, apart from the eldest one, who actually got great taste in music and sings a bit, but she doesn't play an instrument. But all the other ones do. And two of them are actually in the music biz kind of. And one of my daughters is a really good bass player, but she only plays a bit at the moment. She's got a day job, but she plays in a couple of bands. One of my sons, until recently, we worked for Mark Knopfler. We worked for Mark for about 7 years at Mark's studio in London as a recording engineer. And my youngest son is a piano teacher and plays a bit of performing, but it's usually in the pit at like a show, musical kind of thing.
Right.
He does a bit of that and a little bit of kind of jazz work, but he teaches mainly, piano teacher.
Something personal to ask you, Robbie, because I'm getting older, and my kids are getting a lot older now. I got grandkids, and I find myself kind of getting teary-eyed and sentimental a lot more lately. Do you find yourself doing that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't take much to set me off, yeah. I wonder why that is. Well, just things become more important as you get older, I guess, don't they? The repair shop, that gets me going. You know that program?
The what?
The repair shop?
No, I don't. The Repair Shop. It's a TV program, is it?
Yeah. People bring something in that's broken or has been damaged in some way or been gone into disrepair that belonged to their father or a relative that passed away, and they bring it in and it gets fixed up by experts. Like it might be a broken piece of pottery or something.
Yeah.
There's this woman, Kirsten, on it that fits it all back together again and that fills the cracks in, so you wouldn't know it had been broken.
Oh wow!
And then, of course, if it's something that belonged to a wife or grandfather or something like that, then people get quite tearful.
Yeah.
And so do I.
Wow.
It's great.
Something about music that way, that it's like songs are like these coat hangers. We put our memories on them, don't we? And it's when you hear that song, that memory comes out of the wardrobe and you put that memory on. And it's like, oh man, I'm back there. I'm back 12 years old at the beach, or I'm back 15 years old at a friend's house, or I'm 21 and newly married. And it's so powerful. It's like this kind of mind-altering, mood-altering power that does make us emotional. I guess it kind of all maybe is speaking to us about our own mortality somehow, because we see how time is going by and our life is happening. I think a lot about those things, a lot.
Is it regret that you might have done so differently that makes you
not
emotional? Or
that's a good question.
What? Because things are better than they are now, or because you're younger, or something?
Probably a mixture, really. Probably a mixture. I think sometimes you're like, this is great. I've got, maybe Kyle, for you, it's like, wow, this is great. My kids, my grandkids, this is the best time of my life. But then, we remember being a teenager and the freedom and before responsibility, and we remember, I think all of it is really kind of in a way, I mean, this is going to I'm sort of zooming out here and being quite macro, but it's all quite a Western peacetime, dare I say it from our British perspective, Elizabethan thing. Because before Queen Elizabeth's reign, there was a war and there was tremendous suffering and there wasn't so much freedom. And in parts of the world right now, people don't have the freedom that we've enjoyed in the West over the last 70, 80 years and the prosperity. We've lived in this extraordinary time of blessing and prosperity and kind of, yes, it's had its traumas, of course it has, you know. Of course it has. Vietnam, 9/11, etc., etc. There's been horrendous things, but by and large, we've lived in this rock and roll era from 1950s to now. We've still got some of the original guys with us, but it will draw to an end. We lost our queen last year.
Yeah.
And it was a stark reminder that eras end. And one day there won't be a Beatle left alive. One day there won't be a Led Zeppelin left alive. There won't be a Rolling Stone left alive. In the not too distant future.
Well, apart from Keith.
Apart from Keith, yeah.
Yeah.
One day we all have to see our heroes go before us. You know, when you're a teenager and you're looking up to these guys. And
I did Bill Wyman's new record, by the way.
No way.
Yeah, I did it. We did the tracks last year, and then I did the one guitar overdub a couple of weeks ago. I went and did another solo. Bill's 86. Bill's great. I mean, you wouldn't know he was 86. I just did a documentary about Brian Jones, actually. Did you see it on BBC Two?
what Bill did.
No, Bill was in it.
Oh, no, I haven't seen it
It's
yet.
really
No.
good. It's
Oh,
good.
right.
It's good on the iPlayer. Check it out. It's really good.
Some of it is, well, at least for me, I miss that time of being a little kid and, you know, playing in my grandparents' backyard and
Yeah.
riding bicycles and not having to worry about anything. And then I also think of when I was in my 20s and my kids were born and missing that time when they were little and playing with them. And you know, now my daughter's, she's 30 years old, you know. She's fixing to be 31.
My oldest
And-
daughter was 40 just before Christmas last.
Yeah, my was 15. That's something. I mean,
I'm 65, by the way. So you know.
well,
it's-
I'm just 12 years behind you.
you know.
I'm not 40 yet. clinging on to the 30s. But you know, it is all a very, very stark and real experience. This human condition of we are, as far as we know for sure, we're finite. Like I'm a believer. I'm a theist. I'm absolutely settled that there's some sort of consciousness beyond my own,
Right.
that I believe we share in. I'm convinced that it communicates with us and through us. This consciousness, this spirit. I don't like the word God because it's full of baggage, but I'm convinced about that. But I still can't guarantee and know for sure that when this body ceases, my consciousness doesn't cease with it. I hope it doesn't. I hope we continue somehow. But so we're on this planet, we're alive, we've got this consciousness that we've been given, we're in these bodies, and yet all around us there's decay and there's people die and people and I think as we get older we get more and more aware just how short this thing kind of is. Like,
was it Pascal or something like that? The paradoxes. So you may as well believe it, because if there is something after you die, then you'd be all right. But if there isn't, it doesn't matter anyway. So you may as well believe in it.
My conviction is we'll all be all right.
Better safe than sorry.
Pascal's wager.
Is that Pascal's wager?
I think so.
Yeah.
But my conviction is I think love is the reason all of this happened.
Yeah, I'm not a theist as such, but I do believe in the power of nature, and I do believe in the power of doing good.
Yeah, and of love.
Otherwise, what's the point in being good?
I think love is the most powerful thing in the world, and it's bigger than anything in its way, and it's how things change. It's how we figure out what matters, and yet when we lose somebody, we grieve, and we're getting very deep here, but it's all connected to why I think people make art, people make music. We want to leave something, we want to contribute something to this world that's beautiful. That's definitely my motivation. I definitely want to leave things when I'm gone. I want to leave a lot of beauty behind me. Now, first and foremost will be my family, my kids, my wife. Should I go first? But creatively, I'm compelled to try and make something beautiful. Sounds cheesy and corny, but honestly, that's, I think, I want to make music that people find beautiful and find meaning in, and find comfort in, and find peace, and even, dare I say it, love. That's my reason.
I think as men, we just inherently want to leave some kind of legacy behind, whether that's children or, like you said, your artwork. Something.
Yeah.
We want to leave something behind for the world to know we were here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I think that that the alternative movement of the youth in the 60s fundamentally changed the West, for sure. But I think maybe it's too early to tell, Rob. I think it's too. We're only 50 years after.
It's all about trust, though, isn't it? Look what happened after Watergate. Nobody believed politicians were telling the truth anymore. And that's even worse now. Sorry, I'm getting into politics.
Yeah.
I happen to agree. I don't know of any that tell the truth anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. Before we leave, do you have a website?
Yeah, it's heldbytrees.com.
And
heldbytrees.com. And we're on Instagram @heldbytrees, Twitter @heldbytrees. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook.
I'm in Rolling Stone.
Yeah, Rob's just had a massive career-spanning article about his whole career up on Rolling Stone.
Honestly, and it was for no reason. This guy from Rolling Stone called Andy Green got in touch with me and said, I do this feature thing called, what's it called, Unknown Heroes or something like that.
It could have been titled.
And we did an hour and a half long interview about my whole life, and it's just in this new edition of Rolling Stone. I don't know whether it's just on the website or whether it's actually in the magazine.
It's a bit of a backhanded compliment, isn't it? Hi, Rob. We'd like to do an article about forgotten heroes.
Well, that's what it's called. Unknown Heroes. I think that's what it's called. Check it out anyway. It's online, and I don't know whether it'll actually be in the magazine.
It's a really great article. It's really comprehensive, and it's put loads of videos in from all sorts of parts of Rob's career.
So if you want to check some of my stuff out, you could go to Bandcamp, RobbieMcIntosh.bandcamp.com, and all my stuff's on there. And there's like a mini biog as well. So, but I have got a website, but I just don't keep it up to date, and I don't even put gigs on it. Terrible. I'm useless for that shit.
I'll be glad to put all that in the description so people can click on it and go to it.
Yeah, Bandcamp. So all my stuff's on Bandcamp. I mean, so you can listen to it for nothing. You don't have to buy it. But if you want to buy it, then that's great. But Bandcamp doesn't do that thing where you can't buy it. He doesn't you can listen to the whole thing. You don't have to listen to 30 seconds of it like iTunes.
And the new stuff will be out on vinyl and CD in August, but you can order it now on innersleeve.com. Innersleeve.com. You can pre-order it and get.
That's a great little label, isn't it? Of a dab in the sleeve.
Yeah, Inner Sleeve and Sound Canyon. They're the label we're working with. Actually, a stateside label.
They specialise in vinyl,
Yeah.
really, don't they?
Yeah.
Order early and get a free gold record from Robbie McIntosh.
You get some signed artwork. Actually, we spent a long time signing stuff, didn't we?
We did spend a lot of time signing stuff the other day. Yeah.
Guys, this has really been an honor, and I appreciate you spending your time with me. And you're always welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. For my regulars, you guys rock because you make it possible for me to do this. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.